We come down to the question that I've been answering since we screened this film initially in San Francisco, and then we screened it in LA. So you're the third group that has seen this film for decades, is what does The Great Gatsby have to do with film noir? So as I've tried to answer that, I think if you look at the film, you look at the subject matter, and you look at the style that it was shot in, the cinematographer is the great Johnny Zeitz, who shot Double Indemnity, and the Paramount dark age style. And it is a very liberal adaptation of Fitzgerald's novel and the play, and it is definitely hard-edged noir. Besides, any movie that has Elijah Cook Jr. and Shelley Winters in it has to be film noir, right? And really, post-war, Paramount Studios was literally being carried on the back of one Alan Ladd. He was a tremendous box office star, was really carrying the studio, and at a certain point, when it couldn't be done, he just finally said, either make the movie or put me on suspension, and I'm done. And he was Paramount's meal ticket. So they came about, made the film, released it. The director, Elliot Nugent, kind of an odd choice. Elliot Nugent is known more for his on-the-road pictures with Bob Hope and Bing Crosby, broad comedy. Very unusual choice on this, but under the studio system, most people, unless you were an Alan Ladd, when you were assigned something as a director or an actor under contract, you saluted the flag and went out and did it, and so he did. Alan Ladd was responsible for making the film, and in a large part, his son David is also responsible for bringing it here tonight. Without any further ado, please welcome our special guest for the evening, Mr. David Ladd. I had no idea, but this film was very special to your father, both professionally and personally.
Well, it was very special. Apparently, it was something that he really fought to get made, and I think the studio always actually had reservations about it. Probably between this Gun for Hire and Shame, one of the only movies that Paramount released that Dad had made, it was a failure. And whether it was because audiences didn't seem to want to see him in this kind of a role, or whether it was just the lack of popularity of the book, or the movie itself, one won't know, but they actually put this on the shelf, always intending to remake it, because shortly after this, the book became very, very popular, and they suddenly realized that they had a very valuable title on their hands. And so they put it on the shelf, never showed it on television, never released it to VHS or DVD, and never re-released it as a film, of course. And to this day, through the efforts of Alan Rhodey and this movie, this is the only print of this movie that I know of.
It is. I mean, this was struck as a new print for us as Universal, as I mentioned. So hopefully with the attentions it's getting, and with the new edition of Gatsby coming out in December, you have to think that might have had something to do with it. One of the amazing things is your dad and Paramount, when you look at post-war Paramount Studios, I mean, your father was carrying that studio on his back. He really had a lot of power, because hit after hit, movie after movie was your dad. And I guess when it came down to that, he used a little of that power to get that movie made.
I think in this particular case, and I think to a degree with Shane, although once George Stevens came on board, it wasn't so difficult. You know, a wonderful director, and
right.
And they made a wonderful movie. You know, this film is very near and dear to our family's heart. I think it was Dad's second favorite role, right, probably, of anything that he did. But also, it was to a person. I think each one of us, it's very much the dad that we remember. This was very, very much who he was. He was very similar to Jay Gatsby. And with all due respect to Robert Redford some years later, who I think is one of the most amazing men in our industry, as right as Dad was to play Jay Gatsby, Robert Redford was wrong.
I agree
He
with
was
that.
too genteel. He was too.
agree with that.
He was not from the street, you know, so to speak. Dad was a guy who was from Hot Springs, Arkansas, who had an existence where he came across country with his mother, much like in The Grapes of Wrath. Ended up in Oklahoma for a little bit of period of time, and then in a tent city out in the San Fernando Valley, and kind of worked his way up from being a grip to
Yeah, he worked as a grip at Warner Brothers on Captain Blood.
He
for
did.
Goodness sakes.
And the irony of that was that he worked watching a lady named Olivia de Havilland, and
There's history there.
Many years later, and Mike Curtiz was the director of it. And many years later, Mike Curtiz and my father, Olivia de Havilland, and myself got to make a movie together called The Proud Rebel. And
A great family movie, by the way, and I mean that in the best of terms. If you've ever seen it, any movie that has as a centerpiece a young boy who has an affliction that he's deaf and a dog, you know you're going to be reaching for Kleenex, I'm telling you. But it's really a undervalued, underrated, great film, and it's the film that brought David and I together, because in writing about Mike Curtiz, he's been dead 50 years, and I sought out David, and it kind of went on from there to the Great Gatsby.
one of the only people
things.
left that's still alive that worked with him. But that was a great director. You know, that's a man who I don't know whether you've talked about him.
I really have. We haven't shown one of Mike's
a
films.
director who not only made The Proud Rebel, but made a little movie called Casablanca. But before that, you know, things like Robin Hood, Captain Blood, Yankee Doodle Dandy, Mildred Pierce. I mean, just an amazing director that so few people know his name. You know, but you know, his films do live.
Yeah. Now, your dad, I think, because he did come up the way that you outlined, I think everyone that I've talked to that knew him or worked with him, and accounts of him, everybody without question liked him because he was a nice guy, and he was nice to everyone because he had you know, walked the tough road on his way up. And wasn't it really, when he got to Paramount and became a big star with This Gun for Hire, he really was in a comfort zone at that studio and with the directors and everything there. Did your family sense that, and did that change after he left?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it was, you know, to him, he never really thought that this was even remotely attainable. He had struggled as an actor for a number of years, and kind of didn't make it, being told he was too short and too blonde. And he had really given it up and pursued a career in radio, and he was doing quite well in radio. And when it kind of took hold the way it did, and This Gun for Hire, I mean, he hit like Dustin Hoffman did in The Graduate. He all of a sudden had this family and this home, and for a good dozen years, that was Paramount. And when he left Paramount after Shane, after the studio system started breaking up and there was so much more money available by not being affiliated with the studio, it broke his heart. It really did. I mean, he had lost his family, and he didn't, his professional family anyway, and something that, you know, was always something that he feared, that all of this would be taken away from him on a moment's notice. And it hurt him. It hurt him very deeply, and was something that he kind of, I think, took a real toll on him, and eventually an early life. So.